Good afternoon, everybody. I'm JT Ennis. I'm here today to discuss with you financial wellness on behalf of the Ascension Wellness Center. I've got four topics I'd like to cover today. The first being related to the current national economic situation, which I have affectionately entitled, Yes, the Spaghetti Has Hit the Fan. The second is about getting back to economic fundamentals. The third, and I'm borrowing from Captain Smith of the Titanic here, yes, we're taking on water, but there's no need to panic. And number four is a discussion about fierce grace as it's related to our relationship with finance during this uncertain time. First, just a quick bit about my background. I began practicing law in 2001 with a firm in Atlanta by the name of King & Spalding, commercial defense firm. I represented big pharma, I represented big tobacco, and I stayed there long enough to get the firm name on my resume and then left. I joined up with the Department of Justice and the Asset Forfeiture Group and spent a couple of years taking the ill-gotten gains of criminals, which led to a lot of great stories, but also helped me to realize that I'm a more effective human being outside of the courtroom. I left the DOJ and went to a real estate law firm in Atlanta by the name of Morris Hardwick Schneider, doing commercial and residential real estate work, where I found after 4 years or so that I was really more interested in the projects that I was working on than I was in the associated legal challenges. So I left in 2008, and in a weird twist of fate, my former boss at the DOJ prosecuted my former boss at Morris Hardwick Schneider for stealing $30 million from the law firm. You really can't make that stuff up. I joined up with a group called Elyton Advisors here in Birmingham. We were consultants, or consigliaries of sorts, to high net individuals who were primarily invested in real estate. We did a lot of tax legal planning, a lot of risk management, which is code word for asset protection, estate planning, generational wealth planning. We bought a lot of distressed debt and distressed assets coming out of the downturn. It was an interesting time, to say the least, and we were on some basis glorified problem solvers. We were there to shave the hair off of less than ideal situations. Elyton came to its natural end in 2016, and I went out on my own with a former employee who is now my partner. We have two companies. One is Restructure, which does consulting work, still doing consulting work for high net folks involved in real estate, same sort of asset protection and wealth planning. But we also do other work. We are helping individuals get back on their feet after or going through troubling times like a divorce or substance abuse of a spouse. Or we also have helped small business in recent years, both with back office support and financial planning as it relates to cash flow rather than investments per se. I've got my cheat sheet here, so please forgive me if I look down as I'm going through this, but I'm not a financial planner, nor am I a stockbroker, so I'm not here to offer tips on making money in this weird world we're living in. I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, but I do think that financial wellness is a worthwhile discussion. So I'm going to jump right in to the spaghetti has hit the fan. We are in a bear market, as opposed to 3 months ago when everybody was wondering, when a correction would come, how significant that correction in the liquid markets, the stock market, would be, but enjoying the economy chugging along in this direction. Today, we have hit in very quick time, the definition of a bear market. The definition that I'm familiar with is bear market exists when we take a 20% drop in the stock market, the U.S. market, from our cycle high. So if you think about the coming out of the downturn in 2008, and we have this market that is trucking like this, we hit a peak in March, if memory serves, and in very short order, we have dropped more than 20%. That means that, yes, we are in a bear market. So the question becomes, at the national level, even the global level, how long does that last? What does that actually mean? And it's anybody's guess. But I will say that I've pulled some statistics that may help us get our arms around the current situation. So I looked at the bear markets that the U.S. economy has suffered since 1946 and have gotten the averages for certain key indicators, at least to me. Number one, the drawdown period from the peak to the trough, which is to say the top to the bottom of the bear market, was 14 months. We are very steep in this current market, and so it's anybody's guess 2 months in whether or not we are at a trough or whether or not we are going to continue to slide over time. The max drawdown, which is to say how far did the market retreat during the average bear market, was 34.5%, which is significant. I know that we've got probably, at least at the Ascension, a broad age range of people. So I may be speaking to people who are in their 20s as well as people who are past retirement age, which this current market provides difficulties on both ends, but potentially different difficulties. The months of prior gains that were erased in the average downturn since 1946 was 65 months, which is significant. We think about that. That's over 5 years of going backwards in our current market. So it might be worth, and I haven't done it to date, but looking at where were we 5 years ago? Where was the Dow peaking 5 years ago? And then more importantly, I think, or most importantly, is our time to recovery. How long does it take for us to get back to where we were? Because assuming that the world keeps turning, the stock market has been pretty predictable in this natural process of retracing and then expanding again. And the average recovery period has been 39 months, more than 3 years. The financial folks that I speak with are today saying, yes, if you're going to put new money in the market, trying to benefit from the upside of the steep downturn, you got to plan on being there at least 3 years, which is, money left in the stock market long term is the best money. I don't think that I've never seen that day trading personally has been of any benefit. So then we get to, what will our current bear market look like? Going back to the steep dip that we've taken over the last couple of months, are we going to bounce right out of that and have a V shape? Are we going to, based on the current COVID situation, have some sort of W where we go down, we go up, we go down, then hopefully back up? And how long does that take? Or is it something different? Do we go down and stay down for some extended period of time? Again, anybody's guess at this point. What I am, and I'm perfectly frank, I'm confused in the liquid markets right now. My wheelhouse is in real estate and debt, and so looking at the liquid markets, which I don't understand particularly well to begin with because of the emotionality associated with them. But what I'm seeing is confusion out there. It's every day there is an article about, every day that there is an article about a COVID treatment or vaccine, a reopening of the or easing of the restrictions in the United States, and the market seems to do very well. And all of this in the face of record unemployment numbers and poor earnings, larger companies filing for bankruptcy, and the true statistics that are representative of where we are with controlling COVID-19 and the spread of the pandemic. And so there is a disjunct, at least in my mind, and I'm not saying I'm right. It's just what I'm particularly witnessing. So, looking at this, let's talk about the downside and the upside, right? The downside, I worry that our COVID-19 trajectory may mirror the trajectory of the Spanish flu in 1918, that just like with the Spanish flu, there may be some sort of reprieve during the summer months, and then once we get to the fall, it could be just a mess. I also am concerned about the civil unrest here in the United States as it relates to the restrictions, and then the lack of leadership and cohesiveness nationwide, but particularly in Washington. It just doesn't seem that there is any true coming together of the nation at this point as to what is best for the whole. On the upside, we have more advanced medicine than we did 100 years ago, which is a real benefit. Number two, our stay-at-home efforts across the nation, I think, have bought the medical community time, and hopefully that will lead to a discovery of some sort of workable treatment or vaccine. And then number three, this is a global issue. This is not just a U.S. issue, and thus I really appreciate the fact that we've got more bright minds working on the same problem. So that is my read on the bear market, and I'd like to move on now to the fundamentals. I may not be qualified, at least in my own mind, to discuss with you stock tips and that sort of thing, but I can at least share with you the basic pillars of financial health as I learn them. The first, and truly evident at this stage of the game with unemployment where it is savings. I would urge everybody, if they haven't already done it, to always try to keep 3 to 6 months of living expenses, uh, if not more, in a money market account that you could tap into when life takes weird turns. I think, it's imperative and very difficult to do. I don't minimize how difficult that effort is in light of the culture in America of instant gratification and credit. Nonetheless, I think that is pillar number one. Number two, and I've seen 3 pillars. I've seen 12 pillars. These are mine, and so feel free to do your own Google search on what makes sense for you. But these are the things I'm going through that I think have to be taken care of before you even get to outside investments, be it in the stock market, in the bond market, in the real estate market, etc. I think these are the things that that build the foundation of a healthy financial life. 2, insurance. Nobody wants to think about the fact that their number could come up, but the reality is that any given Sunday. So I think that life insurance and short-term and long-term disability insurance are very important for a financially fit family. I'm not that well versed in insurance. What I can tell you on the life side in particular is that I'm a fan of term insurance rather than whole life. I don't know in my mind that whole life makes a lot of sense for me, but it does for a lot of people. But with term insurance, term life, as cheap as it is, it is a much more accessible vehicle to protect one's loved ones in the event of a catastrophe than whole life is today. The third, estate documents. Again, we're thinking about some sort of end of life scenario and nobody wants to do it. But I'm telling you, in my experience, and I have had a decent amount of experience here, estate documents are an essential. Number one, a will. If you don't have a will, what happens is you go through what's called an intestate estate situation, which involves the court in a way that a will being probated does not. It can be a much muddier situation than having a will to direct what happens with your assets in the events that something happened to you. Also, I will point out that attached to a will, you can have what's called a codicil. And if, as you're working through the disposition of your assets in a will, should you choose to do so, there may be particular things that you want to leave to particular people. And you can accomplish that very simply through having a codicil and just saying, I want Joe Bob to have this. And I think that's a wonderful idea. My experience with, my best experience with a will without a codicil, speaking to specific things, happened in Atlanta. I had 2 grown men. One was 76, one was 78, and they were in my office, and we were discussing the passing of their mother. She was significantly older, lived to the ripe old age of, and had passed. And the 2 men began arguing over a piece of furniture that belonged to their mother. And the mother had not said, I want one or the other to have this. And the argument got heated. And these two men um, actually engaged in the slowest example of pugilism that I have ever seen. It was haymakers that took a good 45 seconds to make it all the way around. And nobody wants that for any of their loved ones, especially not at that age. But all that to say, these are things to think about when you're going through estate or creating estate documents for yourself and for your spouse. I also recommend an advanced directive. Don't put difficult decisions on the people who are going to survive you. You'd much rather speak to your wishes in an end of life situation beforehand. There are only so many things that you can take care of from the grave, and one of them is your wishes as to whether or not you're put on life support in certain situations, etc. It's just a nice thing to do for the people that will survive you. The third, a power of attorney. Appoint an attorney in fact to act in your stead in the event that you're incapacitated but have not passed. We all have things we have to take care of every day, like paying bills, etc. And the power of attorney allows that person to work for you in that regard. It's an essential piece to the estate puzzle. For some people, trust may be in order. I'm not really going to speak to trust. It don't apply to everybody, but certainly can if anybody'd like to take that one step further after this video. There are ways to get estate documents drafted. You can certainly go to an attorney, and I've worked with some very good estate attorneys over the years. I've also I'm familiar with the online options, LegalZoom. There's a new company here in Birmingham called Willingworth, and I know the estate attorney who is one of the creators of that online sort of estate document approach, and he is probably one of the top 3 estate planners in the state of Alabama. And so there are those options for people whose estates are not as complicated. And again, I'm happy to discuss estate documents, even though I'm not an estate planner, to discuss these documents with you, should we want to, after the fact. So here are a couple of things that are not in the traditional 3 pillars, but they're very important to me. Number 1, or I guess this would be number 4 now, cash on hand. I would suggest that if you can find a way, keep some cash in small bills available to you. I saw this need play out back in 2011 when the tornadoes came through. Lori and I were running a nonprofit that supported the employees of Gentiva Home Health, now Kindred Home Health, or Kindred Health Services. And the tornadoes came through, and what we realized were that there were Gentiva employees up in North Alabama that, because of the loss of the power grid, they couldn't use credit cards or debit cards, and nobody really wanted a check, and they needed cash. And so we were able to run about $30,000 in $1,000 increments up to our employees, or the employees of Gentiva, in order to help them bridge that difficult point where they needed U.S. dollars. And it's crazy to think. It's easy to see. Okay, well, yeah, if you're in Cairo, U.S. dollars may go a long way, but we don't really think about having that same situation happen here in the United States. Even though it certainly can, it has, and I recommend that, again, if possible, don't go burying it all in the backyard, but keep a little cash on hand. And then the last one is retirement accounts. Before you decide to go out and conquer the world in the by making bets in the stock market and the other markets out there, I would suggest considering your retirement accounts that may be available to you through your employer, 401ks. You've also got those that are individually based, like the traditional IRA, the Roth IRA. All of these or these sorts of retirement vehicles all have their pluses. They all have minuses, but the pluses can really benefit you over the long term. Again, I'm happy to delve into that more in more detail at a later date. Third topic we've got, let's see here. We are moving on to Captain Smith of the Titanic. We are taking on water, but there is no need to panic. So what do we do in this bear market cycle and in this instability and uncertainty that is seemingly rampant in the world right now? Well, number one, we don't panic. Emotional decisions when it comes to financial well-being are largely regrettable decisions. I won't say it's 100% trust your instincts, but just because you get your statement in the mail and your retirement account is down significantly, don't panic. Just hold fast, roll with it. This is a natural part of an organic economy. It's kind of, I equate it to an old real estate thing of, never fall in love with a house, because if you do, you'll overpay for it. You fall in love with something, and the problem is that there's always another house. And so again, my point being, try not to act emotionally during this time. And if that means don't read your financial statements that are coming from your retirement accounts or your investment accounts, and so be it. They cause me anxiety when I see them and there's a downward trend. And so right now I'm just shredding them, not even looking at them. I will get back to it, but right now I feel better just letting it be. The third thing is, I guess it may be a third thing, is if you have a financial advisor you work with, or you're part of a group of advisors, whatever, trust those people rather than trying to grab the reins and control those decisions. Wonderful. Back in 2013, when I was with Elyton, we had a disgruntled employee sue the partners personally, and it was a 3-year ordeal. We ended up winning that lawsuit, but for me, it was both disheartening and unsettling, having to go through this process. And I had a wonderful attorney represent us during that process, an old bulldog litigation attorney by the name of Jim Harris here in Birmingham. And I remember one day expressing how just anxious I was with the situation. And Jim said, JT, I'm your attorney. You pay me to worry. You go home, be with your family, put your feet up. Let me do my job. And I really appreciated that in that moment. And so I would, if not suggest, I would hope that you're able to, during this period, um, trust your advisors as well. Uh, Historically, I know that past performance is no indication of future performance, but it's all we have to go on in this moment. And uh, just hold fast and roll with it, and as best you can. And uh, hopefully, this will work through in short order. The last topic I'd like to discuss with you is it's economically related, but it's really applying a more spiritual aspect to our relationship with finance. And this is a notion of, or a concept of fierce grace, which I've taken from Ram Dass, the author of Be Here Now. And I'll get back to Ram in a minute. But in this moment where our freedoms are somewhat restricted with this shelter in place or stay at home, we're all concerned, I would imagine, some more than others, I'm sure, about COVID and the economy and our economic well-being. I think it presents us the opportunity to sit with that uncertainty and examine our own relationship with money. We can look towards needs and wants again. What do I need to live? What I want to live? What am I spending my money on currently that I'm not using, taking advantage of? I think that's an important thing to do um, as I encourage everybody to save a little bit more during this period. I also think it's worth asking, why are we spending money on certain things? Um, Ask the question, do the things I'm spending my money on actually bring me joy? That's a very important question. Uh, the Dalai Lama said once that the very purpose of our life is happiness. And so if we're not spending money on things that bring us outside of obviously our basic needs, but things that bring us joy, then we really need to examine that. I had a client, former client, who's now deceased, and he was and is worth in the neighborhood of $25 million, and his wife and his son are still living in the same French Manor style house on 10 acres of land that in 10 years the boxes haven't been unpacked and the furniture hasn't been placed. They have a 22nd floor condo down on the coast that I'm the only one of the family that's ever stepped foot in it. And that was just to make sure that somebody had cleaned the pigeon mess off of the deck. It's a tragic story and a prime example of people who have all the means in the world and still are not finding any joy whatsoever in the blessings that they have. And so if you can identify what does bring you joy that you spend money on, I would encourage maybe during this time, maybe spending a little bit less on that, but maintaining that, it's going to that spending will probably assist with all the jitters that we have in the world right now with your ability to enjoy life, which I think is essential. And then getting back to Ram Dass and this notion of fierce grace, there's a movie called Fierce Grace dealing with Ram Dass. Ram Dass, his name was Richard Albert. He was a Harvard professor at one point in time. And after a series of events, won't ruin the film, was given the name Ram Dass by his Indian guru back in the late 60s, and wrote a very pivotal book for the awareness movement called Be Here Now. And at some point, Ram had a stroke, and before he wanted to have a stroke, and was having difficulty dealing with that, which is the substance of this film. And what he found was that pain, which we all as human beings, being physiological beings, we experience pain. We cannot control that. But suffering is completely within our control. And I think during this period of uncertainty, economic instability, we are probably going to feel some pain, some more than others. But I think it's somewhat inevitable. But it doesn't mean we have to suffer as a result. I think that if we can work towards finding some acceptance, some peace, and some calm in order to develop that acceptance of where we are in the world, then we have a better chance of working through it sooner. There's a wonderful recording on the On Being website. I believe it's called the Summit on Happiness. I can't remember exactly, but Rabbi Jonathan Slack refers to Genesis, and if memory serves, 32:26, where Jacob says something along the lines of, "I will not let go of you, let you go until you bless me." And Rabbi Sachs, he says his interpretation of that is that when something bad happens, we're in the middle of something that is seemingly bad, I will not be able to let go of that bad thing until I've discovered the blessing in it. I like that. We've all got work to do in that regard. At least I do. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know that finding a blessing in the midst of all this or the blessing in the midst of all this is difficult, but I'm hopeful that everyone will have some success with that. All right, I'm going to quit now. I'm almost at 40 minutes, probably more than you wanted this afternoon. Again, I'm happy to discuss any of this with you in greater detail. If you think there's anything that my companies can do for you, please contact me. I do have some reports from recent reports from UBS, whom I work pretty closely with. That's the Bank of Switzerland. In regards to COVID scenarios, planning, financial planning through this period, and just the larger kind of global economic situation. I'm happy to send you those reports, share those with you if any of you would like to read those. And I'd like to leave you with something I read yesterday from the Talmud. It says, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's suffering. Do justice now. Live compassionately now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. I love that. We've all got work to do. So in this craziness, economic uncertainty, I wish you and yours God's peace, that which passes all understanding. Good night.